In the inbox late night, glowing screens see the light. Do-do-do, email, everything feels alright.
You could take your customers and you can say, okay, the customers that are, their AOV is like in the bottom 20%. How do we treat them differently than those in the upper 20%?
Today, I'm joined by Eleah Portillo, VP of Marketing for Wellness.
You could still dust and personalize what's been tried and true and proven in other flows. And that was like such a duh moment for me. I think a lot of marketers have the best intentions and they are not leveraging the data that they have because it's shiny object.
How do you make product subscribe work as a marketer?
There's a couple of things.
It's the world's best email and retention podcast, and I'm your host, Jordan Gordon. We are a member of the DTC network of podcasts and the philosophical home of the Pilot House email and customer retention team. Today, I'm joined by Eleah Portillo, who is the VP of Marketing for Wellness. There's a bunch of different stuff we're going to talk about, some segmentation, some product subscribe, some address generation tools, some subscribe features like pop-ups, a wide range of topics. Eleah is just like a lovely person to chat with, so I thought I'd bring her on. Hello.
Hello, Jordan. I feel like I'm getting the better end of this deal because I get a whole hour or 20 minutes of consulting with Jordan.
Full disclosure, Wellness is a client, so she gets lots of time with me, more than anybody needs. But thank you for that. Before we just discuss anything, I wonder if you can start by just telling us your path that got you to Wellness, and also, where you're taking the company while you're there.
So I'll do the first part quickly because I think what everybody's going to screen real quick for is there credibility and is there background that I should pay attention to and try to learn from. So my entire career, basically 20 years, has been direct mail, affiliate marketing, heavy with email, a lot of customer acquisition, digital marketing, agency side, consulting, professor at LMU of e-commerce, and most recently, prior to Wellness, I was at Smarty Pants Vitamins, built their D2C from scratch. Smarty Pants Vitamins ultimately got acquired by Unilever, spent a couple of years there, got to learn from some amazing colleague brands at Nutrafol, Liquid IV, Onnit, like honestly, some of the best, Ollie. And then here I am at Wellness, and I am the VP of Marketing here. So I oversee D2C, Amazon, brand, all things words, pictures, clicks, conversions.
Awesome. Wow, what an intro. Certainly some big names there, for sure, and a wide variety of stuff that you've done. So hopefully the audience thinks that it's worth listening to our whole podcast. I'm sure they do.
Yeah. If anything, learn from my mistakes, what I would do better the next time.
So we had our three topics, and you actually were really keen. Audience, I brought Eleah on to talk about product subscribe, which is she's marketing a product where people subscribe to it for like a year or whatever. But before we get into that, she wanted to talk a bit about segmentation, and we actually have a shared background. She did kind of RFM in direct mail, and I did RFM really old school email, and that's how both of us kind of got an early start. So why don't you jump in and just give some of those thoughts?
Cool. So it's funny because one of my team members thought that she misheard me when I said that my first job was in mail. She's like, "You're not that old." I was like, "Eliza, please." If it didn't work, your actual physical mailbox would not still be overflowing every single day. But yes, my very first job out of school was with an Omnicom agency that did direct response fundraising for nonprofits. So, for example, my client was World Vision. Sponsor a child, like a Christmas catalog to donate a goat to a village. That was the sort of fundraising that we did for them. Now, how we looked at things with direct mail in particular was recency, frequency, monetary, so RFM. And what we would do was we would look at, okay, how recent has that person made a donation, or in our case, a purchase? What was the amount of that donation and how frequently? And so we would make a grid, map everyone out into where they fall in those buckets, and then the dollar amount, for example, that we would ask them to donate would be dependent on them. Or sometimes if they were like really like sparingly donating, just like we do now on email, we were really trying to minimize how many times we would send them direct mail requesting them to donate, and then instead saving it for the prime time, so to speak. And so we apply this today, like in our work together. I think everyone who's listened to your podcast is obviously setting that up. But when I think about monetary, for example, like how can we apply this approach to email? You could take your customers and you can say, okay, the customers that are, their AOV is like in the bottom 25 or 20%. How do we treat them differently than those in the upper 20%, right? So maybe the ones who are these lower AOV customers, maybe we save them just for the sales. Maybe we do them sparingly, but for our biggest, best, boldest sales, right? If you're in that upper 20%, you are our fanatics, right? Like you clearly love us. So maybe we show them love. Maybe they're the customers that get early access drops. And then also other things like maybe they get extra loyalty and referrals and those sorts of things. Or maybe if you're doing consumer research, that's the segment you tap. But I really think also like you can have you can promote bundles for them. You can promote custom things just for that segment. And then for that middle chunk, that's your upsell to subscription. That's your cross sell to other products. That's your incentivization just to kind of grow their AOV. But I thought it was really interesting to think about how do you apply those old school tactics in an email in addition to just the timing, right? Because like timing, we could talk forever about the segmentation. But, I thought that would be interesting to open up with.
So to continue discussing this and a little bit for the audience, I mean, I have done some Googling on this before. So first of all, from what I read, RFM was invented by Sears in the 1800s.
Catalog. Okay, that makes sense.
Because they discovered through their research that when the last time someone purchased was, how often they purchase, and how much they spend are the three factors that are most predictive of when someone will spend in future. So if you take those three factors and make a grid, the people that have are most recent, most frequent, spend the most, are the most likely to purchase. Why was this important to them? Because they sent out catalogs, and sending out those catalogs was expensive. It was a big cost. So to minimize that cost, they would send obviously more catalogs to people who are likely to spend, more flyers, etc. And the way that, to my understanding, transfers into email is the cost is the sending is free now. The cost now is permission. Are they going to subscribe? And inboxing. Now, when you send too much, you actually get less inboxing. But, and this is where I think you might, where some of this might make sense for what we're doing for you, is that now, when you think about inboxing, it's not actually the spending that's important, it's the engagement.
100%. Yeah.
So what we do here at Pilot House, our team, is our segmentation is kind of like an RFM. It's like it's you can still kind of recognize it, but I don't do RFM anymore. But it's got the recency of the engagement and the frequency of the purchase, which just for me are very useful. And I ended up dropping the monetary amount
For now.
for now, yeah, not because I think it's important to drop it, but because I had to come up with something that I could replicate across like 100 clients if I needed to. So it had to be simple.
Okay, but I'm going to interrupt you and say at the same time, for those listening, if you do work with Jordan, it's not a one size fits all. What I will say is every month we deep dive and we start tweaking and fine tuning and calibrating. And I think, Jordan, we're going to get that monetary component integrated eventually, maybe in a couple months.
Yeah, if that's what you want.
And then to your point, the other thing with that is you're still sending smaller batches. Ultimately, where we're going to go, I think for my company at least, is the flow. Like you're sending smaller batches on your flows. We are leaning heavy into the flows because that's where most of the revenue is going to be coming from, right? Because it's obviously very thoughtful triggers. But even on the campaign side, I think we're going to get to versions, not to freak you out, but I think we're going to get to a lot more versions, and we could talk about that maybe later today or maybe on future sales calls. But the whole point is to increase that engagement, right? Like to have that one-to-one relevance, to get to give the customer what they're looking for, what's interesting to them. And that's ultimately going to help with inboxing.
Yeah. By the way, everybody, it's great that Eleah had so many nice things about to say about our service. I didn't bring her on here to cheerlead our service, but thank you for those comments. But I think about like what our team is doing, and it's like if we get a new marketer in, fresh kind of to the industry and new to an agency, one of the first things to kind of get into someone's head is you can't message everybody all the time. It's fine, you know what I mean? Like, so if we split things up by like 9 or 12 different segments, it's actually, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? And so clearly, you don't want to just pick your favorite 8 and then send every single email to those favorite 8, because all you're going to do is just drive down your click-through rate. And who here likes getting 3 to 4 emails from a brand a week?
Exactly.
I mean, maybe Anthropology, they've got a beautiful program.
Sure.
But most of us don't want 3 to 4 emails a week from a brand. And so when you talk about making those small little segments, what we think about is, okay, well, you know, if we add another message per week, who's appropriate for that message?
Exactly.
And our benchmark is something like 6 messages per month to the average user. Even if someone's making like 12 messages, where the average user is getting 6. Sorry, you were going to say?
You said, so it's the who, right? Who are we sending to? And the big thing for me, the more I think about it, is the obviously the why. I could talk about that forever, but the when. So this is also goes into that segmentation, right? Because one thing we could learn from our friends in product marketing, right? Product marketers, their whole shtick is very smart MBA shticks, but their whole thing is, what is the emotion of the consumer when they come to your app or come to your site, and like where are they at emotionally at each stage in the journey? How do you want them to feel after they use your service? Blah, 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 right? And they study that, they measure it. That's why they're all amazing at CRO and all that. But you could take that and think about similarly an email. Where are they in our journey from like a when standpoint? Meaning, if they're in my prospect list and they just came to my prospect list, I want them to get my very thoughtfully constructed welcome series. Maybe we dial down the heavy promos on the campaigns, right? Maybe we dial down like I'd love to get your feedback on this, but maybe we dial down some of the other flows that may automatically trigger, like maybe if there's like 30-day reactivations or whatnot, or browse abandonment, to make sure that they get that welcome series. But then if they're in my prospects and they're opening my emails and it's like closer to 60, 90 days, but they're opening the emails, but they haven't purchased, is it because we're not showing them what they thought that they were signing up for, but why are they still reading it? Are they buying on Amazon, but still reading? So these are all different things that we could start to customize and tinker with to make sure that we're speaking to them where they are. And then the other thought is like, this is another thing that I learned from you actually, is when you candidly, historically, once you made a purchase, I treated you as in my prospects and my customers list, right, for campaigns. But the first time customer, that's a very different customer than a repeat customer, which is a very different customer than a subscriber.
Yeah,
do you want to
totally
speak
different.
more about your POV on the difference between a first time and a repeat?
Anybody who's been listening to the World's Best Email Retention podcast, you all know the first thing I ask you to do is go to your monolithic segment that you send to everybody and split it up by prospect and buyer. First thing you got to do. But if you just go to your list, if anybody here goes to their list, let's say you've got 100,000 addresses, to pick a round number, you're going to look at that list, and the first thing you're going to see is half of them or more are prospects. Most of those are stale prospects. So 40% of your list is just dead weight. We do see that maybe 5% of purchase of buyers every month are from that group. So it's something, but it's a big lift to get them to purchase. Okay, then you got buyers, which are going to be half of that. Let's just say half your list. It's a good ratio. But then 10 or 20 are going to be your repeat buyers. Different for you because your product subscribed. So these numbers are different for product subscribe. But point being, there's this huge drop to get to buyers. And then there's this huge additional drop just to get to someone who's bought twice. Even smaller for 3 times. So the thing is, for 3 times, I mean, I'm looking for ways to just scale people quickly. So the way I see it, someone who hasn't bought, that's a totally different person. And the messaging for them is the stuff you're pushing out through your ads window. But then once you get that buyer and we start saying, hey, we can start sending different messages to different people, you don't want to have an email program that's all pushing out your like value props that you give to
The generic
prospects on
ones.
Facebook.
Yes. Biggest mistake. Biggest
Nice
mistake.
talking to your buyers.
Click
And
deeper.
we always see like pretty common for us to see like maybe 65, 70% throughout the year of the revenue in Klaviyo is buyer revenue because we've got the buyer segment and we've got flows that trigger off of placed order. So we know exactly what's coming from buyers. So if it's 70% buyer, why would you make a program where you're doing your value props that you do in Facebook? It doesn't make any sense. Actually, your Klaviyo should be built around talking to someone who is a buyer. That's what's going to win. And in my mind, again, just trying to make something that where I can just scale anybody, which is what I'm trying to do right now. Once they get into repeat, the drop off from repeat to like first time repeat to second time repeat is so big that it's like if they make it to repeat, let them run free, and just, let them repeat again. But the important point is when you've got that group that are repeat, you don't want to keep doing expensive inducements to purchase to someone who's into your run free group, right? It's like, do they still need to get 10, 15% off every time you got to drive some revenue? No, 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 no. They're in your repeat group. They're happy. They're your base. And you want to just, monetize your base, right? So
Yeah.
that's just some thoughts that I have. Does that make sense?
No, it's a good one. Yeah. When I think about first time buyers versus second time, so those first time buyers, they, they get an ad, landing page, upsell, they make that purchase, they bought probably off of an incentive, right? So that first time buyer, you also then need to ensure that you are mitigating buyer's remorse, education, nurturing them, reminding them about the good. Okay, so I work in wellness, right? I've worked in supplements and better for you foods for a long time. So this may not be the same for fashion or for beauty, but the principles still apply. But remind them what's going on in the background of your body, or maybe your confidence, or whatever the purpose is that they bought. Whatever they originally bought it for, that's still happening, and maybe they don't feel it. But the email needs to serve to educate and remind them, to reinforce more details about why they bought it, and to tell your brand story, and then to pull them in to be a part of that brand story is really more that second buyer, because at that point they like you. Like, you don't need to keep hammering them sales. Like, they want a relationship with you. You don't want to be needy. You want to give a little. So
Yeah. So I'm actually, I should have just checked before even this call. I'm not sure exactly what Jack's up to with you right now.
gosh, you
And
say you checked in the pod.
but
Brutal.
is there a subscribe retention flow kind of launching right now?
Yeah, so I'm doing a real annoying one, Jordan. Maybe that'll be a different conversation, but we're customizing it per SKU. So a little bit of background before wellness is that we started obviously with a hero SKU like most brands do, and it has a very core purpose. But we started to build out a product line that follows the consumer from the start of their day to the end of their day, entirely built on what Phil Mickelson, who, if you don't know, he's a very, very good at golf, is what I hear. So he's been, he's one of the oldest ever win a Masters. He's been playing forever and ever. And part of his turnaround story and longevity is truly because of these products. He takes them literally every day. And so they were truly based off of like what him and his friend Dave Phillips, who is an Olympic level performance coach who partnered with him on building these formulas for him, following Phil through the day. What does he need like before the game, in the middle of a game? Golf is quite a long game, so you need endurance and then muscle recovery and all that stuff. So we've started to expand our product line quite a bit. Within 2 years, we went from 1 SKU to, we're going to have about 9 by the end of this year. So we are building out post first subscription flows per each SKU, because they each address a very different pain point, right? Which is, again, different than fashion, different than beauty. Some of your other brands may have different issues. But for me, I thought to be honest, like the personas within those segments are probably going to be next year's fun, but I have a really annoying one that we're going to be working on. Yeah.
No,
Cause I'm just so anti like one size fits all right now, but crawl, walk,
we're excited for your 9 retention flows.
crawl, walk, run. Jordan, this is a long-term partnership, okay?
The important point though from that, the point they're all important points. The point I was getting at though is that we're doing this. You were talking about getting rid of that buyer's remorse, and you know what? I admit now that our approach to this in Product Subscribe is subscriber retention. So it's like, you've seen the chart, right? You get your prospect, and then you get your first time buyer, and then you get your repeat buyer. And once someone's in the repeat, they're not going to be in the first time buyer lane, and it's very kind of controlled in an automated fashion. And you can also control it with campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're working on, okay, they're in subscribe, so we don't need to push subscribe anymore. Now we're educating them and becoming really close. But what I realize is that, yeah, there is, from this discussion, there obviously is a place for that first-time buyer. And I will admit, because I am at heart a performance marketer, email is a performance channel, that I see post-purchase is, in my mind, 30 days to make them a repeat buyer. And so we go on this, like, put people through a gauntlet to drive that second purchase within 30 days. And I can see now, I mean, just from this, that I've got to go back and think about that a bit, and think about how we can get some of that subscriber retention magic in that post-purchase, which is obviously just taking some of that content and reproducing it in a different
Exactly.
way.
And that's the other thing is, like, how do you rip and reapply like what's already performed? Another trick that we learned from you actually is, okay, if you couldn't guess already, I have a tendency to overcomplicate things, right? Well, LOL, all my former teammates and colleagues and employees are probably laughing right now. That said, you could take you could still dust and personalize what's been tried and true and proven in other flows. And that was like such a, in retrospect, duh moment for me. Like, of course, why am I rebuilding this every single time? We already know it's proven and works from campaigns. Put it in your flows. It's crushing in this flow. Can we like make this a campaign that we basically reskin and pop out every couple months, right?
Yeah, continuation. Anybody who wants to know how continuation works, you can go to DTC Podcast episode 311, where I discuss it with Eric. And yeah, like when you've got a killer campaign, don't throw it away. Put it in your continuation flow. And then people who just come into your program are just getting, every now and then, they're just getting the best content, right? And if it's been a long time since they've engaged, boom, they engage and they're back in your campaign window. You're going to get them both.
I have a tangent for you that's email related, but not email related, but I hope your listeners would be interested. Thinking about like using your campaigns to test headlines and messaging and angles and hooks. Okay. Like, why are we spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month to test this on Meta and TikTok and all the fun players? Which, yes, you should be, but like, why wouldn't you also be testing this on our own contained, like, I have you and you're not being distracted by scrolling or by other ads or by competitors. Like, maybe we can leverage email a little bit more to test headlines that could then be repurposed into those more expensive acquisition tests.
Yeah, so I've got two conflicting thoughts on that, right? One, look, you're right, and I was just having this discussion, like kind of internally with the team, and on the brand side, I was often in situations where like there's this kind of thinking about broadcast messaging, the Don Draper kind of messaging, and email was very much part of that, because it's your entire kind of core audience is in your emails. So we say, how can we speak to this entire core audience, and then we do our photo shoot. So we're going to spend $200,000 on this photo shoot, right? And then a lot of that downstream goes to kind of performance, and performance is about like, look, let's make as much money as we can off of these assets, right? And so the handoff was in that direction. And I mean, honestly, the way that we work at Pilot House is it's actually in the other direction. And but what I'll say at Pilot House, it's a performance agency, and we've got like it's kind of embarrassing. These kids are so smart, and I'm so old, and I'm like, oh my god, if I was never this smart when I was that age, right? And so, like, you know what? They test through in the efficient ads funnel, right? And what I will say though is that the way we approach it, we're on paper for performance. So as ROASs get better and things like that, kind of the team makes more. So they are so efficient at it that we just are downstream from that, and we're fine with it. But in general, like if what you said after this call was like, hey, we want you to start trying different angles for us, and the way that you would do it is the easiest way to do it, and this is how I did it always when I was on the brand side, is two different subject lines, one on campaigns, right? One subject is this angle, the other subject is the next angle. Hopefully you make the email so that both subjects kind of, you still get good continuity. And those A/B split tests, one, they're free, and two, you get to do one in literally minutes on every single email that goes out. And so then that just becomes part of your strategy. And so, when you make your monthly calendar, like, it's like, look, here's the two things we want to learn, the three things we want to learn. And that kind of just gets baked in. And that's the way to do that. That's the way to do that for sure.
Noted.
So I've got some other stuff here on the list. We're at 31 minutes. Sometimes I did the zero bounce one and I went 55 minutes. I do long pods because there's so much to talk about in e-commerce. It's great, isn't it?
I think it's fun, but I'm a nerd, so.
Yeah. So we talked about segmentation, which is pretty cool. Actually, before we jump into this other stuff, what were you teaching? And I'm just curious. It was so interesting. I haven't spoken to people who were e-com teachers. What did you teach?
Oh my God, I taught them meta ads. Okay, in the beginning, we did like a quick framework on, okay, you want to have a startup. Okay, look, if you want to do fundraising, you need to do traction, right? Like you need what is your lowest common denominator to prove your case, blah, blah, like a little bit of like startup 101.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, cool. Guys, Facebook ads, meta ads, TikTok ads, whatever, lead gen, CRO best practices 101, email flows from a high level. We had 2 days on email. I taught at Loyola Marymount University, which has they have actually quite an incredible entrepreneurship program for undergrad. And so, oh gosh, it's I forget what their new name, their umbrella name is, but Flow Vitamins, like that was a graduate that came out of LMU. Liquid IV came out of LMU. There's quite a few brands that came out of there. So I would have them sign up for former LMU brand companies, like that were incubated out of their entrepreneurship program. And we would look at flows as, okay, guys, what happens when you abandon cart? Who has the biggest discount? Like how many times are you emailed? Let's compare subject lines. And it was really interesting, like eye-opening to them. That was really fun. And then we talked about performance creative and creative strategy and all kinds of fun stuff. So
that's super interesting.
You should take my class next year. I don't teach in the fall because of Black Friday, but maybe in the spring. Maybe in the spring.
Nice. Yeah, you know what? It's one of the reasons I came here was just to pass on my skill set. Right. I mean,
It's
what do
fun,
you do?
right?
Yeah,
It's so fun.
totally.
But the only reason why, oh my gosh, if I win the lottery, I'm just going to teach and have like 100 dogs and horses. But until then, I like to work because it keeps you fresh and crisp because so much has changed. Like I looked at the deck that I made for my class last year, and already I'm like, ooh, I think I want to make some changes. There's so many cool new tools. And like, actually, what are some of the tools that you're most excited to test out in 2025? Because I feel like I have a Christmas list that I want to go through, and there's just so many.
Let's talk about the one that we're going to test right now.
Okay, let's do it.
What's the tool that you want to test with us right now?
Okay, so I haven't used it. Can't confirm, but I'm very excited to try it. Yes, I'm biased because our name is the same, but they spell it differently. So the tool is called Eleah. I think it's Alia. And what we're going to work on together with Jordan is it's basically a pop-up that appears, and yes, you can get your incentive just to give your email and SMS, right? Like, of course, that's basic 101. It's beautiful, blah, blah, blah. But then you can incentivize the consumer. Hey, do you want to get 15% off, or do you want us to throw in free shipping on top? And then we as the brand can decide what they get for that extra incentive. And so what I'd like to test is maybe asking one question, maybe who are you shopping for, right? That's really important information. Are you shopping for your partner, or are you shopping for yourself? Are you shopping for your kids? Very different messaging, very different considerations based off of that. And then maybe you can also click through where the next step that you want them to do to unlock that free shipping, maybe it's tell a little bit more about the brand story. If you think that there's information that will really help nurture and convert that user, can you not just have them like have a little one sentence in an interactive way, then they can read it and click through, and then that unlocks it? I'm really curious to see if understanding a little bit more about our brand story and why we exist, obviously not making it about us, but making it about the consumer, and what we suspect their pain points are, potentially based off of what they selected in the previous question about who they're buying for, and tailoring it to that. Can we improve conversion rate? And what is the impact on LTV? And also, are we also growing our like CDP so we can understand even more, like we can start to do more advanced segmentation because we are extracting a little bit more information from them. So my understanding is that you can tailor it as little or as much as you'd like. I'm thinking we'll start probably with like 2 to 3 steps before they unlock free shipping, but I'm super excited to test this one.
Yeah, so I first saw it on I want to get the brand name correct. I saw this on a brand. Let me just find it really quick for the audience here. Thrifty. The brand, the first found was called Thrifty. It's like a jewelry brand, and I was just signing up, and I just said, "Oh man, this pop-up is perfect." So there's two things that are great about it. One, it's good for extracting information, which was going to feed into segmentation, but also it is like there's so much information that I want to get through about a new brand, like in the welcome flow. It's like it's manufactured in Italy and it's got all these things that you want to teach them. But what do? They get welcome email one, order, use the discount, and all that. And then, they probably stop getting the rest of the welcome flow. And if you have a flow where it keeps sending, they're checked out anyway. They're waiting for their thing to arrive. And so you've got this kind of one, we don't do long welcome flows just because of that. It's like 3 or 4 emails only. But all of that information I wanted to get through, I then got to stuff it into Cytoband and hope I can educate them some other place. Well, okay, why not just say to them, it's 10% off or 15 if you want to learn some more about us. And
Yeah.
then they go through, they learn all the things. And the nice thing that I saw when I went through it was like, okay, here's your 15% off. You've got 29 minutes. And there's this urgency thing, which is
Sure.
so it was hitting 2 different cognitive biases in one go. It had, you know what I mean? It had sense of urgency, loss aversion, and all this kind of stuff. It's just a great tool. So for the audience, it's Eleah.io. Is that what it is? Eleah pop-up.
I'd have to
Google
Google
Eleah
it.
pop-up.
It's ALIA pop-ups,
Yeah.
you'll find it.
It seems like a pretty interesting tool. So
Yeah, and don't freak out. We haven't even tested it yet. But one thought that popped in my mind just now was, what if you use those questions as qualifiers? And so you have maybe, let's say you have like 2 or 3 key personas. That one question figures out which welcome series are they getting into based off of what speaks to them, right? So
yeah, it's kind of like it's lots of people use quiz. By the way, your product subscribe. We should talk about product subscribe for a second.
yeah, we should.
So because that's what the chat was. But I noticed for whatever reason, product subscribe companies often have a quiz. It's just a thing, right? If you're like kind of one and done blue widget, upsell a red widget, I find it's less often there's a quiz. But once it's product subscribe, there is. My guess is there's so much value in getting someone on the product subscribe that it justifies learning so much more about the customer and putting them through different journeys. And so why don't we use that for a segue and start talking about how do we, oh, sorry, I apologize, audience. About, say, 20% of our clients are product subscribe, which means they bought the product. Usually they buy one at first, and then they sign up and they get it every month. And so it's like product subscribe. So why don't you talk a little bit, Eleah, about maybe quizzes for product subscribe or product subscribe in general? What makes it work? How do you make product subscribe work as a marketer?
There's a couple of things that I mean, I feel like they're 101, but we'll just say it and you can guide the conversation in a different direction if you think it's too obvious. But one, you have to be able to give the consumer the full flexibility. Like, this is just table stakes. They need to feel confident that they can pause, that they can change the date, that they have control. Because, like, what is everyone's number one reason is either I have too much or it was too expensive. But really, it's like those all mean that they just felt like it was easier to cancel than to modify it off their needs. So first and foremost, be as flexible as possible with how much gets delivered, how frequent can it be delivered. Two, give them, and this is one of those things that like I think I learned the wrong way at Smarty Pants, to be honest, because I was, we'd have so much fun with like promos and campaigns that why would I ever have sales other than a couple key moments? Let's be honest, Black Friday, Cyber Monday is its own beast, but why would I ever offer things that give a subscriber an incentive to unsubscribe so that they could take advantage of a different deal? So it's not just segmentation and not showing your subscriber sales. Sometimes you can show them sales, but maybe it's secondary in the email placement, or maybe they get access to the sale, but in a different way, right? So still nurture them and show them those things, but also maybe don't have your sales like don't have fire sales all the time. Like, not only does it cheapen your brand and make but it makes your subscriber wonder why bother subscribing if I could just use a promo code every month for a bigger discount. So those are just two things that came to the top of mind.
So first of all, I would say the first one is not obvious. That was not obvious to me at all, and that makes perfect sense now that you tell me. And on the second one, that's why all your discounts should go in your reactivation flow, and it starts 6 months after purchase or whatever. And you can make it a killer offer. You'll actually generate revenue from it if it's a killer offer, and you'll kind of just like cash flow some of your product. But then no one's going to get an offer for 6 months or 120 days or whatever it is after they purchase. That's how I think about that. So what about my how I noticed that most people who are product subscribe have a quiz? Is that
Well, I'm going to
gonna
give
be
you
okay?
my honest opinion because I have a couple thoughts on this one. One, many moons ago, I was in the affiliate marketing industry, similar, I think, to potentially some of the co-founders of your company, based off of the fact that they're in Victoria, Canada. I suspect there's a never blue relationship there.
Oh
A
yeah.
little old school. But anyway, there was a time so in that world, though my book of business with affiliates, basically these are media buyer guns for hire where they would get paid only if they made a sale. They would front their own money. It was no rev share. There was none of that. It was just they were so motivated to find these niche pockets and unlock what works for them that they were just really good at media arbitrage. So, point being, it was a tried and true tactic to have a quiz. And back then, nobody was collecting the data from the quiz. The quiz results were meaningless. The whole point of that quiz was if the consumer took the steps to go through that quiz, they had a higher likelihood of purchasing because they made it so far. So there's that component. And then I'm going to be real with you, Jordan. I think a lot of marketers have the best intentions and they are not leveraging the data that they have because it's shiny object, or candidly, like pressure from above to launch a new thing or keeping up with the Joneses. That's like a big thing. I think a lot of brands may have a hard time. You have like a cool kids list that you're looking at of like, oh, they do everything right. And you see a tool that they have. And so you immediately want to replicate it. But if you don't have the time to execute the right way, I don't know if you should have 100 things half baked. And I think unless you're actually leveraging the data from that quiz, learning from it, like making segments from it, maybe figuring out how to unlock acquisition messaging from it. I mean, there's so many things you can do with it, but I think a lot of brands aren't using it properly because of time and bandwidth.
Yeah. So two things in that one clean funnel. But before that, when we
Sure.
talk about the affiliate guy or girl who never blew, who was or wherever who was doing this, like you still have to bid on the traffic to get them to do the quiz. And so, which brings me to my thinking always on these kinds of things is like, sure, but you're putting them down a path that doesn't end with a conversion. You're putting like 8 clicks in the way, and it's not a cart. There's all this stuff. So, but I mean, I'm sure they figured it
Well,
out.
the other big thing with the other thing I'll say is okay, well, two things. One, for that consumer back in the day that would go through these quizzes, part of me thinks that while we are all trained, you need to treat things as sunk costs. It's really hard for us as humans naturally not to think of our time as a, think of our time that way. And at that point, they are committed. Like if they're making it through that quiz, they are converting. Um, but another thing is personalization was such a hot topic in D2C. And I don't want to call it a trend. I want to call it an evolution because frankly, we all deserve to have everything tailored to us, right? The hurdle that D2C brands run into is then once you grow 100, 200 million, you get into retail. How do you replicate that at retail? And that's a different conversation, maybe for a different podcast, maybe for a different time with you. But how personalized you get, I think you should think about. I mean, I want to over personalize every time. But for some brands, if your end goal is to get into retail, think about how that's going to translate. Because I've seen a lot of hurdles from brands trying to make that transition. But at the same time, that aside, because that's obviously like bigger, grander, years down the road, that quiz again, if you're using it to pique intrigue, like a lot of the best quizzes. So like Take Thesis as a brand, I think the CEO is incredibly smart, phenomenal products. I look at them as best in class. So everybody should go buy their products, check out their flows, like look towards them. They do a phenomenal job with their quiz. One, because they are personalizing the product recommendation, but two, like as you're taking that quiz, it's a fun discovery process because you're thinking, wow, it's identifying, I don't want to say pain points, that's such an overrated word, but it's identifying, maybe I'm like, oh yeah, that maybe I am tired because of XYZ, or maybe that, it starts to spark curiosity about ailments or considerations that it's like an education process. It's just like the Eleah thing, right? And I think if you do it right, and I think a lot of brands don't do it right because of time constraints, but if you do it right, yeah, it should, like those extra clicks should lead to a conversion.
That's why I liked Eleah, because it was part of the sign up. It's not this other thing that I've
It's
got
an
to,
above and beyond,
I've got
yeah.
to
And
get people
the
down
time
this other
sensitivity
path.
is a good trick, yeah.
Now, on the one clean funnel thing, look, we're now stepping out of things that I have proof of, and now we're entering the realm of opinion, right?
Sure.
So everybody be warned, this is opinion. But like, look, me and my team, a lot my team doing it, right? We set stacks up all day. We're just setting people's, email segmentation, flows, everything stacks all day. And in my opinion, unless you're like, certainly unless you're 8-figure, I don't think you should have all these different things shooting out all over the place. And the reason, there's a number of reasons. One, this Amazon exec one time said to me, anybody can make something complicated. It takes real intelligence to simplify.
Yeah, that's such a great call out. And I also want to say, like, it depends. I do want to clarify. It depends how much money you're spending on acquisition. It depends on how big your business is. Crawl, walk, run, 100%.
Yeah.
So I do want to put that giant disclaimer on my
Yeah.
commentary.
But the other reason one clean funnel is important to me, and so you might have heard this one in our original sales process. Okay, let's set the first thing up really good, right, and then build on that. Well, if you're going to put another branch out, that branch has to outperform a general one clean funnel. So some people, they'll say, hey, we're going to put 4 branches, and then they never even figured out, well, was there a single funnel I could have pushed someone through that performed well enough that, even if it didn't perform quite as well as the 4 branches, you've got 1/4 of the technical debt, right? You've got 1/4 of the things that can go wrong. You've
That's
got
a great
1/4
point.
of the messages you have to update every time you change your logo, all that stuff. And so when you've got like just, 20, 25 automated messages that all work really well and that you can steer really quickly, the case for having 4 different funnels to push someone down. Now, I'll say like in your case, by the way, I don't know if we were on a meeting when I did this, but like I went to the office and you'd sent me a bunch of the product. By the way, the 4 Wellness product, I sat there and like ate like 2 big bags of these things.
Gummies.
They were so delicious. Oh my God, the audience, I'm not just saying this. I sat there and I was in some meetings, and then afterwards I thought to myself, oh my God, am I going to like get the sweats or gas or something? I didn't even read what the active ingredients were. By the way, everybody, all that happened was I felt great.
Yeah.
I ate 2 packs of these things, huge packs. I
I mean,
was
those
on fire
electrolytes
all
and
day.
antioxidants and tart cherry, you're going to be just fine. You're going to be just
Yeah,
fine.
it was great.
You're
So I can
great. No
recommend everybody try For Wellness. I've also got lots of sports injuries. It was, the whole thing felt good. When you start getting into like, so here's my thing from lots of sports, just my lower back. Oh my God. Climbing, jujitsu, just like Ashtanga yoga. Oh my God. Now I got 2 kids. And so like, look, that's very different from say another reason that someone would come to you. So of course, there are reasons for some brands to have multiple funnels. And so again, we're just at 2 different sides of a coin where it's like make sure that your multiple funnels from Quiz or
Or
Eleah,
1 + 1 = 3 and not
yeah,
detracting,
yeah,
right?
makes
I
total
totally hear you. I
all
guess
day.
we're in such a high growth phase, to be totally honest with you. It's so exciting on the customer acquisition side that we're like unlocking personas based off, and like we're layering in predictive LTV to these personas. And so that's why I'm getting excited, because I'm realizing that we have a couple of key segments that are coming to us for very different reasons. And that's what I'm excited about. And so, I'm maybe putting the cart before the horse. But for most brands, yeah, start simple, get the data, make data-driven decisions. And again, if the whole technical debt thing is such a huge conversation, you are completely correct. Completely correct as far as having to go back and update flows, or, there's a compliance change or a formulation change or new photography. I mean,
And you
great
know
point.
what? This is what I
Great
see
point.
all day. It just
That's why
doesn't.
I pay you guys to do it for
Yeah.
me.
Well, this one of the reasons we set that up efficiently for sure is because
Yes,
we have to,
exactly. I
we
hear
have to
you.
manage our own work. But what I see happens most of the time is it just doesn't get updated. And I have people come and they've got 80 messages and they kind of just hand us this, right? And honestly, the best thing to do is just tear the Band-Aid off fast. And that's horrible because you're like, wait a second, we paid some other agency thousands of dollars to make those messages, right? But even
Sunk
they
cost.
know we don't want to. No one wants to figure out what these things do.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and it's a mess when you get under the hood. I hear you. Um, and you need to be able to have clean reporting, and if you're not getting that, do not add complexity. So,
Yeah, for sure. So, is there anywhere that we can send people to find you, or should they just, obviously go and purchase from For Wellness? Any closing comments there?
well, if you're a badass marketer, hit me up on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to hook you up with a promo code or something for wellness. It's truly the only reason why I'm full time is because the products are so phenomenal that there's just so much potential. But reach out to me on LinkedIn. Please don't send me a bunch of spam and try to like put me in some automated LinkedIn flow. I'm not going to respond. But if you really want to connect, I'm happy to chat with all of you.
Okay, well, spammers, entrepreneurs, and executives, have fun spamming.
In the inbox late night, glowing screens see the light. Do-do-do, email, everything feels alright. Do-do-do-do.
Hey, entrepreneurs and spammers, remember, you can't scale without email, and the cheapest customer to acquire is the customer you already have. So please subscribe to the world's best email and retention podcast and learn how to make low-cost revenue a big part of your digital ecosystem.